sun go down,
when the sun go down,
I'll be so glad when the sun go down.
when the sun go down,
I know that sleep is rough.
uh-huh.
I wanna lie
Don't
down.
wanna lie
I
down,
know that sleep is rough.
uh-huh.
I wanna lie down.
Don't wanna lie down,
I wanna lie down. Sleep around. I wanna lie
don't
down.
wanna lie down,
I know that sleep is rough.
uh-huh.
I wanna lie down.
Don't wanna lie down,
Oh, what's got the matter, baby?
baby.
Yeah, I can't see.
Well, I can't see,
Oh, what's got the matter, baby?
uh-huh.
Yeah, I can't see.
Well, I can't see,
You're the starting at the
uh-huh.
driver.
Put it down on me.
Peace, peace, family. Welcome to Yemima's World, the Jelly Moose's Cafe. I am your hostess, Yemima, and of course, it is good to be black in the land of the living once again. I do not own the rights to the music that you heard at the beginning. It is called I Be So Glad When the Sun Goes Down, and it's from the album Sounds of the South. I don't know who the artist is. But yeah, and if you're listening to the words of it, he says in it, I'm not sleepy, but I just want to lay down. We know that our ancestors worked from sun up, from can't see to can't see. And we know that, you know, they were tired. Yesterday, it was crazy because on Saturday and Sundays, I find myself in the afternoons taking a nap. And at times I felt guilty. I'm like, why am I taking a nap? I'm not really sleepy, but I just want to this nap time. And then the ancestors spoke to me and they said, you honor us when you take a nap because we couldn't. So we have to do the things that our ancestors were not able to do, things that they couldn't do. When we do those things that they couldn't do, I used to think that was dishonoring them, that I should work as hard and do the things the hard way. And they said, no, child, we already did that so that your life won't be as hard. Take that nap. And I did. All right. So let's get into it. We are still in Hoodoo Heritage Month. Again, shout out to Mama Ruth for creating such a wonderful time again for us to come together and learn and to reminisce and to remember our ancestors. Now, I wanted to do this one on Sunday, Plantation Hoodoo. It's basically plantation church and plantation hoodoo. We know that on Sundays on the plantation, our ancestors were forced to go to white churches and to listen to the rhetoric of obey your slave master and all of that stuff. But we also know that they went down to the Brush Harbor and they would, have their own worship experience. So I want to read a slave narrative today from a Georgia woman who was enslaved. And this was, her name is Celestia Avery. And the interview was done in 1936 and 1937. All right, so this is a few facts about Miss Avery. She was a small mulatto woman, about 5 feet in height. She was remarkably clear on remembering the views and facts that she had. She was about 75 years old at the time of the interview. Before the interview, she reminded the writer that the facts to be related were either told to her by her grandmother, Sylvia Hurd, or facts that she remembered herself. Again, born 75 years ago, but at the time of this writing in Trope County, LaGrange, Georgia, the eighth oldest child of Lenora and Silas Hurd. Wow, the eighth oldest child. Okay. There were 10 other children besides herself. She was born around 1862, so around the height or the beginning of the Civil War. She and her family were owned by Mr. and Mrs. Peter Hurd, and in those days, the slaves carried the surname of their master. This accounted for all slaves having the same name, whether they were kin or not. The owner, Mr. Hurd, had a plantation of about 500 acres and was considered wealthy by all who knew him. Miss Avery was unable to give the exact number of slaves on the plantation, but knew he owned a large number. Cotton, corn, peas, potatoes, etc., were the main crops that were raised. The homes provided for the slaves were two-room log cabins, which had one door and one window. These homes were not built in a group together, but were more or less scattered over the plantation. And it's crazy because we see a movie about those times, they kind of show the quarters. It looks like almost like a neighborhood that you would see today, but according to Queen Mother Celestia Avery, that was not the case. The homes were very simple. They only contained a homemade table, a chair, and a bed, which were made of some type of wood and could easily be cleaned by scouring with sand every Saturday. So look at this. They said that they had a bed made of wood that could easily be cleaned by scouring with sand every Saturday. So even back then on the plantation, Saturday was their day to clean their quarters. And we know that Saturday is still our day to clean our houses. The beds were bottomed with rope, which was run backward and forward from one rail to the other. On this framework was placed a mattress of wheat straw. Each spring, the mattresses were emptied and refilled with fresh wheat and straw. Each spring, y'all, they were doing spring cleaning back in the 1800s, and we still do it today. Oh my goodness. All right, so they were required to prepare their own meals 3 times a day. This was done in a big open fireplace, which was filled with hot coals. The master did not give them much of a variety of food, but allowed each family to raise their own vegetables. Each family was given a handout of bacon and a meal on Saturdays, and through the week, corn ash cakes and meat, which had been broiled on the coals, was the usual diet found in each home. The diet did not vary even in Christmas, only a little fruit was added. Wow. I remember at Christmas time, we would put out like these boxes because we didn't have stockings. And we thought Santa Claus, my mother and father would put fruit in them at Christmas time. We got fruit at Christmas time. Not that we didn't have it all year long, but it was kind of bought in abundance at Christmas time. Oh my God. Each family was provided with a loom. In Miss Avery's family, her grandmother, Sylvia Hurd, did most of the carding and spinning of the thread into cloth. The most common cloth for women clothes was homespun and calico. The same cloth was dyed and used to make men's shirts and pants. Dye was prepared by taking a berry known as the shoemake berry and boiling them with walnut peelings. Spring and fall were the reasons for masters to give shoes and clothing to their slaves. Both men and women wore brogan shoes. The only difference being the piece in the side of the women's shoes. Now look at this. It says that spring and fall were the seasons for masters to give shoes and clothing to their slaves. And sometimes they would give Christmas gifts too, and we'll get into that Christmas time. One woman was required to do the work around the house. There was also one slave man required to work around the house doing odd jobs. Other than these two, everyone else was required to do the heavy work in the fields. The work began at sun up and lasted until sundown. In the middle of the day, the big bell was rung to summon the workers from the field for their midday lunch. After work hours, slaves were then free to do work around their own cabins, such as sewing and cooking. In North Carolina, they still ring a bell. It's not a lunch bell, but it is a bell. And I'll talk about that at another time. And it says here, after work hours, slaves were then free to do work around their own cabins, such as sewing, cooking, etc. I remember um, my father, we had two big gardens, and he would go to work 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, and he would come home and he would go straight to his garden, you know? So Oh, we're still doing, what we did before. Once a week, Mr. Hurd allowed his slaves to have a frolic, and folks would get broke down from so much dancing, Miss Avery remarked. The music was furnished with fiddles. When asked how the slaves came to own fiddles, she replied they bought them with money they earned selling chickens. At night, slaves would steal off from the Hurd plantation and go to LaGrange, Georgia, and sell chickens which they had raised. Of course, the master always required half of everything raised by each slave, and it was not permissible for any slave to sell anything. Another form of entertainment was the quilting party. Everyone would go together to different person's home on each separate night of the week and finish that person's quilt. Each night, this was repeated until everyone had a sufficient amount of covering for the winter. Look at this. They came together as a community. This is just so awesome. Each night, this was repeated again until everyone had sufficient amount of covering for the winter. Any slave from another plantation desired to attend these frolics could do so after securing a pass from their master. Miss Avery related the occasion when her Uncle William was caught off the Hurd plantation without a pass and was whipped almost to death by the paddy rollers. We know the paddy rollers are now police officers. He stole off to the depths of the woods where here he built a cave large enough to live in. A few nights later, he came back to the plantation unobserved and carried his wife and two children back to this cave where they lived until after freedom. When found years later, his wife had given birth to two children. No one was ever able to find his hiding place, and if he saw anyone in the woods, he would run like a lion. Mr. Hurd was a very mean master and was not liked by any one of his slaves. Secretly, each one of them hated him. He whipped unmercifully and in most cases unnecessarily. However, he sometimes found it hard to subdue some slaves who happened to have very high tempers. In the event this was the case, he would set a pack of hounds on them. Miss Avery related to the writer the story told to her of Mr. Hurd's cruelty by her grandmother. The facts were as follows. Every morning, my grandmother would pray. An old man Hurd despised to hear anyone pray, saying they were only doing so that they may become free niggers. Just as sure as the sun would rise, she would get a whipping. But this did not stop her prayers every morning before the day. This particular time, Grandmother Sylvia was in the family way, meaning she was pregnant. I remember my mother used to use that term in that way, in the family way. She never said pregnant. Okay. And that morning she began to pray as usual. The master heard her and became so angry, he came to her cabin, seized and pulled her clothes from her body, and tied her to a young sapling. He whipped her so brutally that her body was raw all over. When darkness fell, her husband cut her down from the tree. During the day, he was afraid to go near her. Rather than go back to the cabin, she crawled on her knees to the woods, and her husband brought grease for her to grease her raw body. For 2 weeks, the master hunted but could not find her. However, when he finally did, she had given birth to twins. The only thing that saved her was the fact that she was a midwife and always carried a small penknife, which she used to cut the navel cord of the babies. After doing this, she tore her petticoat into two pieces and wrapped each baby. Grandmother Sylvia lived to get 115 years old. Not only was Mr. Henderson cruel, but it seemed that everyone he hired in the capacity of overseer was just as cruel. For instance, Mrs. Henderson's grandmother Sylvia was told to take her clothes off when she reached the end of a row. She was to be whipped because she had not completed the required amount of hoeing for the day. Grandmother continued hoeing until she came to a fence. As the overseer reached out to grab her, she snatched a fence rail and broke it across his arms. On another occasion, Grandmother Sylvia ran all the way to town to tell the master that an overseer was beating her husband to death. The master immediately jumped on his horse and started for home. In reaching the plantation, he ordered the overseer to stop whipping the old man. Mrs. Avery received one whipping with a hairbrush for disobedience. This was given to her by the mistress. Slaves were given separate churches, but the minister who conducted the services was white. And there are some people, this is a side note, this is me speaking now, this is not from the interview. Um, there are some people today, black people, that still go to churches with a white minister. They sure do. Let's see. Slaves were given separate churches, but the minister who conducted the services was white. Very seldom did the text vary from the usual one of obedience to the master and mistress and the necessity of good behavior. Everyone was required to attend church. However, the only self expression they could indulge in without conflict with the master was that of singing. Anyone heard praying was given a good whipping. But most masters thought their prayers no good since freedom was the uppermost thought in everyone's head. So they couldn't even pray. This is why they had the brush arbors. They couldn't even pray. If you've seen the movie Harriet, you know that there is a scene where Harriet is praying at a tree, and her oppressor, her enslaver, comes up and tells her to stop praying, and basically tell her that Jesus don't hear the N word. So on the Herd plantation, as on a number of others, marriages were made by the masters of the parties concerned. Marriage licenses were unheard of. If both masters mutually consented, the marriage ceremony was considered over with. After that, the husband was given a pass to visit his wife once a week. In the event children were born, the naming of them was left entirely to the master. Parents were not allowed to name them. All right, side note. So I traced my ancestors back to the Peter Davis plantation in North Carolina. And one of my ancestors, my great grandfather, name is Peter Davis. So, yeah. All right, back to the interview. Health of slaves was very important to every slave owner, for loss of life meant loss of money to them. Consequently, they would call in their family doctor if a slave became seriously ill. In minor cases of illness, home remedies were used. In fact, smiling remarked, Mrs. Abrams smiled and remarked, we use everything for medicine that grew in the ground. One particular home remedy was known as cow foot oil, which was made by boiling cow's feet in water. Other medicines used were horehound tea, catnip tea, and castor oil. Very often, medicines and doctors failed to save life. And whenever a slave died, he was buried the same day. Mrs. Avery remarked, if he died before dinner, the funeral and burial usually took place immediately after dinner. Although a very young child, Miss Avery remembers the frantic attempt slave owners made to hide their money when the war broke out. The following is a story related concerning the Hurd family. Mr. Hurd, our master, went to the swamp, dug a hole, and hid his money. Then he then he and his wife left for town on their horses. My oldest brother, Percy, saw their hiding place, and when the Yankees came looking for the money, he carried them straight to the swamps and showed where the money was hidden. Although the herd farm was in the country, the highways were very near, and Mrs. Avery told of the long army of soldiers marching to LaGrange, singing the following song. And I won't sing the song, I won't even read the song. When the war ended, Mr. Hurd visited every slave home and broke the news to each family that they were free people and they, if they so desired, could remain on his plantation. Mrs. Avery's family moved away. In fact, most slave families did. But old man Hurd had been such a cruel master, everyone was anxious to get away from him. However, 1 year later, he sold his plantation to Mr. George Traylor, and some of the families moved back. Mrs. Avery family was included. Mrs. Avery married at the age of 16 and was the mother of 14 children, three of whom are still living. Although she had quite a bit of illness during her lifetime. At present, she is quite well and active in spite of her old age. She assured the writer that the story of slavery which she had given her was a true one and sincerely hoped it would do some good in this world. This is part two of the interview of Miss Avery. In a small house at 173 Phoenix Alley, Nebraska, lives an little old woman, about 5 feet two in height, who was a ex-slave. She greeted the writer with a bright smile and bade her enter and have a seat by the small fire in a poorly lit room. The writer vividly recalled the interview she gave on slavery previously and wondered if any facts concerning superstition, conjure, signs, etc., could be obtained from her. After a short conversation pertaining to everyday occurrences, the subject of superstition was broached to Miss Avery. The idea amused her, and she gave the writer the following facts. As far as possible, the stories are given in her exact words. The interview required 2 days, November 30th and December 2nd in 1936. So these are some of the superstitions that Miss Avery told the interviewer. When you see a dog lay on his stomach and slide, it is a true sign of death. This is so true because it happened to me. Years ago, when I lived on Pine Street, I was sitting on my steps playing with my 9-month-old baby. A friend of mine came by and sat down. And as we sat, there was a dog that followed her, began to slide on his stomach. It scared me, and I said to her, "Did you see that dog?" "Yes, I sure did." That night, my baby died, and it wasn't sick at all that day. That's the truth, and a sure sign of death. Another sign of death is to dream of a newborn baby. The one night not so long ago, I dreamt about a newborn baby, and I went to the door and called Miss Mary next door, and I told her I dreamed about a newborn baby, and she said, "Oh, that's sure a sign of death." The same week that gal's baby over there died. It didn't surprise me when I heard it, because I know somebody around here was gonna die. Listen, child, if ever you clean your bed, don't never sweep off your springs with a broom. Always wipe them with a rag or use a brush. Just as sure as you do, just as sure as you do, you see or experience death around you. I took my bed down and swept off my springs, and it just happened to tell old Miss Smith. And she jumped up and said, "Child, you ought not to have done that, because that's a sign of death." Sure enough, the same night I lost another child that was 8 years old. Child had heart trouble, I think. Miss Avery believes in luck to a certain extent. The following are examples of how you can obtain luck. I believe you can change your luck by throwing a teaspoon of sulfur in the fire at exactly 12 o'clock in the day. I know last week I was sitting here without a bit of fire, but I was thinking about doing that till a woman come by and told me to scrape up a stick fire and put a spoonful of sulfur on it. And sure enough, in an hour's time, a coal man came by and gave me a tub of coal. Long time ago, I used to work for some white women, and every day at 12 o'clock, I was told to put a teaspoon of sulfur in the fire. Another thing, I sure ain't gonna let a woman come in my house on Monday mornings unless a man doesn't come in first. No siree. If it seemed like one ain't coming soon, I'll call one of the boys chillers just so it's a male. The reason for this is because a woman is bad luck. Now, she said on Mondays, I don't know about who's listening, but it was for us, it was always New Year's Day. The following few luck charms described by Miss Avery. A black cat bone is taken from a cat. First, the cat is killed and boiled. Oh Lord, I hope 45 never to become 47. Hear this, because he's going to say, "I told you they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats." I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Black bone cat is taken from a cat. First, the cat is killed and boiled, after which the meat is scraped from the bones. The bones are then taken to the creek and thrown in. The bone that goes upstream is the lucky bone and is the one that should be kept. There is a boy in this neighborhood that sells liquor, and I know they done locked him up 10 to 12 times, but he always gets out. They say he carries a black cat bone. Okay. And then they have in parentheses, The black cat bone rite is notoriously cruel and inhumane, for the cat is generally boiled alive. Two uses Two uses are generally ascribed to the bone: invisibility with respect to the law, and the power to force a straying lover to return. Okay, I don't even know what that means. All right, so the devil's shoestring looks like a fern with lots of roots. My mother used to grow them in the corner of our garden, and they are lucky. And this one, mojos. Mojos are always carried tied in the corner of a handkerchief. I don't know how they make them. I bought a lucky stick from a man once. It looked just like a candle, only it was small, but he did have some sticks as large as candles, and he called them lucky sticks. But you had to burn them all night in your room. He also had some that looked just like buttons, small and round. And then there's going to be some stories about conjure. I know a man once a long time ago, and he stayed sick all the time. He had headaches from morning to night. One day he went to an old man that was called a conjurer. This old man told him that somebody had stole the sweatband out of his cap, and unless he got it back, something terrible would happen. They said this man had been going with a woman and she had stole his sweatband. Well, he never did get it back, so he died. Wow. I had a cousin named Alec Hurd, and he had a wife named Anna Hurd. Anna stayed sick all the time. For 2 years, she complained. One day, an old conjurer came to her house and told Alec that Anna was poisoned, but if he would give him $5, he would come back Sunday morning and find the conjurer. Alec was wise, so he bored a hole in the kitchen floor so that he could just peep through there to wait a minute, hold on. Alex was wise, so he bored a hole in the kitchen floor so that he could just peek through there to the back steps. Sure enough, Sunday morning, the man came back, and as Alex watched him dug down in the gourd piece, then he took a ground puppy, threw it in the hole, and covered it up. All right, he started digging again, and all at once he threw it in the hole and covered it up. He started digging again, and all at once he jumped up and cried, "Here it is! I got it! I got it!" "Got what?" Alex said, running to the door with a piece of board. "I got the ground puppy that was buried for her." Alex was so mad he jumped on that man and beat him almost to death. They said he did that all the time and kept a lot of ground puppies for that purpose. Continuing, she explained that a ground puppy was a worm with two small horns. They are dug up out of the ground, and there's a belief that if you die if one barks at you. They were called mud puppies or water dogs, kind of like a salamander. So basically, yeah, because this is written in her dialect, so it was kind of hard for me to get through it. But basically, the conjurer said that the wife was poisoned, and he was going to find the conjurer. So he basically went back to the man's house while he thought he wasn't there and buried the conjure himself so that he could come back and dig it up and say, okay, this is what is causing your wife, that the poison for your wife. Oh, wow. And it was bold. And then she relates ways to keep people from conjuring you. One thing I do every morning is to sprinkle um, chamber lye. Chamber lye is urine because they had chamber pots that they would go to the bathroom in. And it says one day thing I do every morning is sprinkle chamber lye urine with salt and then throw it all around my door. They sure can't fix you if you do this. Another thing, if you wear a silver dime around your leg, they can't fix you. The woman lived next door and says she done wore two silver dimes around her legs for 18 years. And then there's a story about a jack-o'-lantern. Once when I was a little girl, all of us children used to slip off and take walnuts from an old man. We picked a rainy night so nobody could see us. But do you know it looked like 1,000 jack-o'-lanterns got in behind us. They was all around us. I will never forget my brother to get out in the path and turn my pocket wrong side out. I told him I didn't have no pocket, but the one in my apron, he said, well, turn that one wrong side out. Sure enough, we did, and they scattered then. In the ending, that's about all I know, but come back sometime and maybe I'll think of something else. All right, so this was an interesting interview. I wanted to bring this story mainly because she was talking about the everyday occurrences that happened to our ancestors on the plantation and the fact that they were still using hoodoo. I know that we have talked about on different social medias, on different in different groups, of what it means to be hoodoo, and those things that she mentioned about the man coming in the house first before the woman. We know that's hoodoo. When we talk about cleaning on Saturday mornings, we know that's hoodoo. And so those things that they were doing just in their everyday lives, in addition to using natural herbs for their wounds, the quote unquote superstitions that they had. All of that went along with them just living their lives from day to day. And we understand that today in 2024, we don't practice hoodoo on specific days. We are hoodoo every single day of our lives and every hour of our lives. I am hoodoo right now because I am telling you stories about our ancestors who were practitioners or who lived a hoodoo lifestyle. And for all of you Black people that are in churches with white pastors, I don't know why. I will never understand that. But hey, do you? If it works for you, God bless. All right. So until next time, you know the drill. Love yourself. Love others. Give yourself some grace. Give others some grace. Stay cool. Stay warm wherever you are. Honor your ancestors. They will honor you. We are our ancestors. And once again, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much to those that have subscribed to the channel. When I started this channel about a year ago, I had 5 subscribers. And at the beginning of Hoodoo Heritage Month, I had about 15 subscribers. I now have about 56. So it has grown expeditiously in this month. I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers at least by the end of the year. If I can get more than that, that would be great. I would appreciate it. So please like, share, and subscribe. This is a channel for us to learn about our ancestors and to learn about our history. I will continue, of course, to bring stories about our traditions, about our inventions, about our things that we have done in the past that affect what we're doing now, and things that we are doing now that will affect our next generations. So, if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, if it has educated you in any way, I am a Jelly Musa. It is my job to educate people on our traditions and on our history. If you like it and it has educated you, please, if you feel led to, my cash app is dollar sign Yemima 86. That's dollar sign YEMIMA 86. It is scrolling across the bottom. Appreciative. So until next time, stay black. Peace, family.